Cumple tus objetivos con el inglés. Un año de inglés con el apoyo de los mejores tutores online. Apúntate en cursodeinglesonline.tve.com y por menos de €1 al día.
Hello again. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know my aunt. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know my aunt. Conoce a mi tío, pero a mi tía no la conoce. She knows. La S de la tercera persona, por favor. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know. Ahora la S está en doesn't. She doesn't know my aunt. Two pronunciations for tía. Aunt and aunt. Se oyen los dos en el mundo anglo de habla inglesa. And yo digo aunt, casi como hormiga, aunt. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know my aunt. Esta frase es fantástica para practicar el verbo auxiliar y para practicar destreza mecánica con la gramática básica. She has a book, but she doesn't have a car. She sits at the table, but she doesn't sit in the chair. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know my aunt. She likes the microphone, but she doesn't like the statuette. It's a beautiful exercise for practicing your English.
Hola y bienvenidos a la clase 133. Ahora vamos a ver la frase She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know my aunt. Ella conoce a mi tío, pero no conoce a mi tía. Y ahora nos centraremos en la primera parte de la frase She knows my uncle. Hemos visto este verbo to know antes, con conocer un sitio. Y aquí tenemos para conocer a alguien. She knows, pero no decimos she knows to. Hay que decir she knows alguien directamente. She knows him. She knows her. She knows sin la to. Entonces, veamos ejemplos. She knows my workmates. Ella conoce a mis colegas. She knows my brother quite well. Ella conoce a mi hermano bastante bien. ¿Te acuerdas de eso? Bastante bien, quite well. She knows. No olvides la tercera persona del singular que con esa S. She knows. Muy bien. She knows my uncle. Mi tío. Hay que pronunciar bien esa palabra. Si no, la gente van a pensar que estás hablando de tu tobillo. Uncle, no ankle. Uncle. Una vez más. Uncle. Eso es.
Yo, 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 it's me, your favorite DJ, live for you. Voy a editar la versión inglesa de mi nueva canción. Ella conoce a mi tío. She know to my uncle? ¿Quién hizo eso? Hay que poner una S. She knows. Así suena mejor. She knows. Y quito la to. She knows my uncle. Así es. Ella conoce a mi tío. She knows my uncle. No hay que decir she knows to my uncle. It's she knows my uncle. Ahora, con unos toques especiales, my special touches, y una melodía, tenemos She knows my uncle, she knows my uncle. A ver, ¿te toca a ti? She knows my uncle, she knows my uncle. One more time. She knows my uncle.
Ahora hemos llegado a la segunda parte de la frase. Antes vimos She knows my uncle. Ella conoce a mi tío. No usamos el to, ¿verdad? She knows my uncle. Y ahora vamos a ver la segunda parte de la frase. But, ¿cómo era? Pero ella no conoce a. Muy bien, usamos el verbo auxiliar. But she doesn't. Does not contraído. But she doesn't. No olvides el verbo auxiliar. But she doesn't know. But she doesn't know. No usamos para conocer o saber. Entonces veamos más ejemplos. She doesn't know my niece. Niece es la palabra del día. Niece es sobrina. ella no conoce a mi sobrina, niece. Niece, eso es la pronunciación. Niece. Muy bien, no niece. Niece, perfecto. Y he doesn't know my niece either. Él tampoco conoce a mi sobrina. Muy bien, niece, la palabra del día. Apúntalo ya.
Oh, hey, it's Mr. Strong. And say hello to these. Mwah! Mwah! Well, estoy leyendo unas quejas. Some complaints. Yeah, es parte del territorio, ¿no? Let's see. Pedro de la Coruña piensa que no trabajo mucho los bíceps. He thinks I don't work out my biceps much? You don't know me, Pedro. You don't know me. Pedro doesn't know me. He doesn't know me. No way. I always work out my biceps, Pedro. You don't know me. He doesn't know me. Okay. Oh, Guillermo from Cuenca. He says, dice que nunca trabajo las piernas. I never work on my legs? Oh, come on, Guillermo, but you don't know me. You don't know me. I always work on my legs. Guillermo? Mm-mm. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know me. No me conoce. He doesn't know me. Yeah, no suena exactamente igual que no. Con K, claro, porque esto es inglés. He doesn't know me. No me conoce. He doesn't know me. How can he criticize? ¿Cómo puede criticar si no me conoce? He doesn't know me. Let's see. Continuing. Elena from Albacete. She says I never work on my stomach. I work on my stomach every day. You don't know me, Elena. Elena doesn't know me. No, she doesn't.
Ahora vamos a ver la última parte de la frase, pero primero repasamos toda la frase entera. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know, ¿cómo decimos mi tía? Pero has dicho mi hormiga. Eso es aunt. Hay que pronunciar la diferencia muy bien entre aunt y aunt. Aunt con una A corta, que es hormiga, y aunt con una A muy larga. A ver si notas la diferencia. ¿Qué estoy diciendo? Aunt. Muy bien, tía. ¿Y ahora? Aunt. Perfecto, hormiga. Veamos más ejemplos con aunt. Mi tía vive en Argentina. My aunt lives in Argentina. My aunt knows Gabby, but she doesn't know Kimberly. Mi tía conoce a Gabby, pero no conoce a Kimberly. Entonces, ahora vamos a ver toda la frase entera. She knows, con la S, she knows my uncle, y no ankle, que es tobillo, uncle. She knows my uncle, but she doesn't know, contrayendo el does not, doesn't know my aunt. Mi hormiga, no, aunt.
¿Sabes qué? El mundo es un pañuelo. Ayer conocí a una chica que conoce a mi tío. Seriously. Incredible. ¿Cómo? No. She doesn't know my aunt. She knows my uncle. My uncle. Tío es uncle. Pues al principio no la entendí bien porque me ha dicho aunt, aunt. Pero no es aunt, es aunt. Se pronuncia aunt. Mira, te explico. Okay. Se pronuncia aunt. No se pronuncia aunt. Dilo conmigo en casa. Eso es aunt. Bien. Well, it's strange. She doesn't know my aunt, but she knows my uncle. I think it's a bit suspicious. But I'm going to ask my aunt about it today. What are we doing? Oh, well, I'm going shopping with my aunt. Yeah. I can get you something from the shop if you like. Sure. What is it?
Hello. Listen. ¿Qué tal el examen? ¿Qué has hecho ayer, por ejemplo? How was the exam? ¿Y el examen qué? ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo te ha ido? How was, así de sencillo. How was the exam? Un poco tramposo, había preguntas trampa. It was quite tricky. Trick es trampa o truco. Tricky es tramposo o lleno de trucos o trampas. How was the exam? It was quite tricky. I'm worried about the result. I'm worried about. Estoy preocupado por. En inglés estamos preocupados acerca de. I'm worried about. I'm worried. Fijaos la M de I'm y cómo enlaza con lo de worried. I'm moi, como un beso. Moi, I'm worried about. I'm worried about. Y la D de worried se enlaza con la de about. Escuchad. I'm worried about the result. How was the exam? It was quite tricky. I'm worried about the result. It was quite tricky. I'm worried about the result.
Bienvenidos a la clase número 133. Y la frase de hoy es How was the exam? It was quite tricky. I'm worried about the result. Es decir, ¿cómo fue el examen? Fue bastante complicado. Estoy preocupado por el resultado. Muy bien, pues vamos por el primer punto. How was the exam? ¿Cómo fue el examen? O ¿qué tal el examen? Y tenemos aquí how. Vamos a ver la pronunciación. Nunca decimos how o how, sino how, con la boca bien abierta. Fíjate, how, repite conmigo. How was the exam? Muy bien. Pues aquí tenemos how was, cómo fue, que es to be en el pasado simple. How was the exam? Por ejemplo, how was the class? ¿Cómo fue la clase? How was the meeting? ¿Qué tal fue la reunión? Y cuidado con la pronunciación de exam, porque nunca decimos exam, sino exam. How was your getaway? ¿Cómo fue tu escapada vacacional? Y aquí tenemos la palabra del día, getaway, escapada de vacaciones. Muy bien, nos vemos en un minuto.
Hello, Steve speaking. How can I help? Oh, hi, Bob. Yeah, I was about to call you. How was the exam? Oh, okay. But how was it? Si quieres preguntar cómo le fue el examen, ask him, how was the exam? That's right, how was the exam? Well, at least you got there on time. Oh, and how was the driving lesson? A crash? Oh, well, at least it was a small crash. How was the... Sorry, Bob, 1 minute. Someone is being very rude. Excuse me, I'm on the phone. Sorry, Bob, what were you saying? Oh, yeah, and how was the meeting? Oof. I don't think you should speak to your boss like that, eh? Sorry, Bob, 1 minute. Some people are so rude around here. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, how was the party?
Vamos con la segunda parte de la frase de hoy. It was quite tricky. Fue bastante complicado. Muy bien, pues aquí tenemos quite, al que le sigue un adjetivo, que es bastante y complicado, modificando complicado adjetivo. Muy bien. Cuidado con la preposición de quite, que no es quiet, eso es callado, sino quite. También con la T bien marcada, quite. Por ejemplo, the soup was quite spicy o it's quite cold today. Y ahora vamos con tricky, que quiere decir complicado, difícil, algo que requiere inteligencia, maña o una habilidad especial. Vamos a ver unos ejemplos. The driver's exam was quite tricky. That question is quite tricky. Esa pregunta es bastante complicada. Ahora, ¿cómo se dice en inglés? Resolver esa situación fue bastante complicado. A ver. Solving that situation was quite tricky. Muy bien, bien hecho. Nos vemos en un minuto.
Oh, hi. I'm just working on some origami. You see, I paint, I play music, I sing songs, and I also do origami, but it's very tricky. Es muy difícil. It's very tricky. That's right, we say it's tricky. It's tricky. Es difícil. It's tricky. It's tricky. Origami is tricky. I find it very tricky. A lot of people find painting very tricky, but I find origami much more tricky. A lot of people find singing songs, playing music to be tricky. I find it a little bit tricky, but origami is much more tricky for me. It's much more difficult. All the details, the folding, the lines, trying to remember everything. It's difficult. I find origami pretty tricky, so if you don't mind, I have to finish working on this. Where was I?
Ahora hemos llegado a la última parte de la frase de hoy. I'm worried about the result. Estoy preocupado por el resultado. Aquí tenemos una expresión I'm worried about. Ahora, to be worried es estar preocupado. Y nunca decimos to be worried. Uy, no, es to be worried. Cuidado con la D. To be worried. Bien exagerada con un sonido extra al final. Worried, worried. Por ejemplo, he's worried. We're worried. Or I'm quite worried. Estoy bastante preocupada. Ahora, si mencionamos por lo que estamos preocupados, decimos I'm worried about something. Por ejemplo, we're worried about the economy. Y cuidado con la pronunciación de about, no about, sino about. Bien abierta la boca, about, about. Otro ejemplo, how was your test? I'm worried about the grades. Estoy preocupado por las notas. Bien hecho hoy y nos vemos en la siguiente clase.
Oh my God, I'm so worried. I'm so worried. Well, what am I worried about? Well, I'm worried because the judges for the best shop in the province came in to have a look at my shop yesterday, and I'm really worried. Oh, I'm worried about the result. Well, I mean, the thing is, I could win it, but there's a new shop that opened just around the corner, and, well, I'm worried about the result. Dilo conmigo, I'm worried about the result. That's right, I'm worried about the result because Kim, la dueña de la tienda, she sells everything and at really good prices. So I'm not just worried about the result, I'm also just worried about Kim in general. I'm worried about my reputation. I'm also worried that the customers, that they're gonna abandon me. I'm worried that they're gonna spend more time in her shop than in my shop. I'm worried that they're gonna see her prices and then they're gonna look at my prices. I'm worried in general and I'm worried about the result.
Hello again. What would you have done if it had happened to you? Oh, I would have been so embarrassed. What would you have done if it had happened to you? What would you have done? What would you have done? What would you have done? ¿Qué habrías hecho tú? Si te hubiera pasado a ti. What would you have done if it, la situación en cuestión, if it had happened to you? Porque no te ha ocurrido a ti, se me pasó a mí. What would you have done? What would you have done if it had happened to you? Escuchar. What would you have done if it had happened to you? Así lo decimos. No tienes que hacerlo tú así. If it had happened to you. If it had happened to me, I would have been, yo habría estado tan violento, tan apurado. I would have been so embarrassed, embarazado, no, apurado o avergonzado. Hello again. Listen, what would you have done if it had happened to you? I would have been so embarrassed. What would you have done? What would you have done? What would you have done? What would you have done if it had happened to you? I would have been so embarrassed. Me habría sentido súper violento, súper embarazoso, apurado. Yes, if it had happened to me. What would you have done if it had happened to you? Yeah, ¿qué habrías hecho tú? De haber sido tú, de haber estado tú en su lugar. Sí. Te hubiera pasado a ti. What would you have done? What would you have done? What would you have done? ¿Qué habrías tú hecho, literalmente? What would you have done? What would you have done? What would you have? Me como la H de have, ¿a que sí? What would you have done? 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 What would you have done if it had happened? If it had happened. Si ello hubiera pasado a ti. O sea, si te hubiera pasado. De haber pasado a ti. What would you have done? ¿Qué habrías hecho? What would you have done if it had happened to you? If it had happened to me, I don't know what I would have done. What would you have done? I would have been so embarrassed. And what would you have done? What would you have done?
Hey, how's it going? Listen, I need your opinion. Last night I had a date with another girl, and after she insulted my sports car, I asked her to leave. What would you have done? What would you have done? She insulted my new sports car. What would you have done? Come on, tell me, what would you have done? Would you have done the same as me? Exactly. Everything was going well until she started speaking about cars. And she started to insult it, saying it's ugly. So, I did what everyone else would have done. I asked her to leave. I called her a taxi. Come on, don't look at me like that. I mean, what would you have done if she insulted one of your favorite possessions? And if she thinks she can insult my new sports car and then expect me to drop her off? No way. So, what would you have done? Would you have kept quiet? Would you have just sat there and listened to her insult your new car? Or would you have said something? What would you have done? Would you have done the same as me? Exactly. Just as I thought.
Hi again. All right, listen. What would you have done if it had happened to you? Me? I would have been so embarrassed. Wow. What would you have done? ¿Qué habrías hecho tú? Si te hubiera pasado a ti. What would you have done if it had happened to you? To me? I would have been so embarrassed. Okay, if it had happened to you. De haberte pasado a ti. Si te hubiera pasado a ti. If it had happened to you. If it had happened. La D, ese sonido de al final suena, en inglés, en triángulo parlantes. If it had happened to you. What would you have done? If it had. Contracción, hacemos una contracción. It'd. I-T, apóstrofe D. Good luck, Si no lo puedes reproducir, no pasa nada. Decir, if it had happened to you. What would you have done if it had happened to you? If it had happened to you. If it had happened to you. Strength. Fortaleza. La palabra del día. Fortalecer o reforzar. To strengthen. Hago ejercicios para strengthen my arm. To strengthen my arm. To strengthen my legs. To strengthen my will. Mi voluntad. To strengthen.
Oh, hello again, my darlings. I'm sorry, I'm a bit busy today. You see, I've joined a new choir, un coro. Yes, a new choir with my Spanish friends. And I'm trying to teach them one of my favorite, all-time favorite songs. It's called If It Had Been Different. Oh, if it had been different. Si hubiera sido diferente. Well, it's about an old love of mine. Oh, and what a song. It makes me think, if it had been different. Oh, well, this is the second time I've tried to teach them the song. The first time they refused to say the word it'd. But it's not that difficult. Escucha. Deja de pensar en cómo se escribe. Sí, I-T apostrophe D. Y piensa en la pronunciación. Es it'd. 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 If it had been different. Good. Do you want to hear a little? All right, wait, I'll practice with you. Oh, we could have been so happy if it had been different. Oh, we could have been so happy if it had been easier. If it had been easier. If it had been different. What do you think?
Hello again. Okay, what would you have done if it had happened to you? Me? I'd have been so embarrassed. Sí, yo si me hubiera pasado a mí, me habría sentido muy apurado, muy violento. I would have been. Contractions. Two types of contractions here. I'd have been, I would. I'd have been so embarrassed. Or I, y contraigo sobre would have been. Yo digo would have, no digo I'd have. Pero también en el mundo 40-60, 60-40. I'd have been, I would have been. Yo digo, if it had happened to me, I would have been so embarrassed. Yes. Tan embarazado, en español no suena, pero es apurado. De pasar un apuro, de sentirse muy violento. I would have been so embarrassed. I would have been so embarrassed. Embarrassed. I would have been or I'd have been. Depende de qué región del mundo anglosajón. I'd have been or I would have been so embarrassed if it had happened to me.
I would have been so embarrassed. I would have been so embarrassed. Have you seen the newspaper? The story in the newspaper? This foreigner was dancing at a flamenco party with a professional flamenco dancer. He tried to, but they said it was terrible. Everyone was laughing at him. I would have been so embarrassed. So embarrassed. That's right. I would have been so embarrassed. I would have been so embarrassed. Embarrassed. I would have been so embarrassed. That's right. Yeah, it says it was at the party, which was, in the same town, right here. Last night. Wait a minute, I was at that party. I would have been so embarrassed. It's me! The story's about me. They said everyone was laughing at me. What? But I'm practically Spanish. Why would they be laughing at me? I'm a great dancer. I'm so embarrassed.